Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm Nathan Shields, and I've got my returning guest. We do a reality episode with him every so often, and we've been tracking his progress as a relatively new PT owner over the past couple of years. Avi Zinn has been part of the reality episodes that I've done, but this time it's been, 8-10 months since we've done our last one. Thanks for coming back, though, Avi.
Thank you, Nathan. It's good to be back.
Yeah, man. You're how many years into business ownership now?
I guess we're coming up on the 5 years, I guess.
Are you really?
The end of
5 years?
2017.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And so I think we started touching base about 2 years or so into it.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
That's right. That sounds about right.
Yeah. And you made some amazing progress from being in the clinic treating to now being out of the clinic treating and seeing significant growth over the last few years. An opportunity that I had with Avi this past year was in February, him being in Atlanta. And just so you know, Avi owns Druid Hills PT in Atlanta. In February, I met up with him and one of his leaders in training, Liz, to do an annual strategic planning session. And it was a 6-8 hour session that we sat in person to talk about where he wanted to go over the course of the next 12 months and what his top priorities would be to really focus his business and hit the most important things that he needs to accomplish in order to set himself up for further growth. So we did that in February, and we haven't really talked much since, right? I just kind of left you up to your own devices and left you with a strategic plan to follow over the course of the next year. So let's start there. That was back in February, and it takes us almost close to where we last visited with you on the podcast. Tell us about your 2022 and how that annual strategic planning session fit into what's happened over the course of this past year.
Sure. It's been an interesting year this year, 2022. So when you came in February, where we were coming off a great year, 2021 for our company was our best year. We had doubled in size compared to 2020 or 2019. Basically, those years were the same because of the pandemic. So going into 22, things were, pretty strong. And then bringing you in, it was really cool and exciting to start focusing on some of these priorities to set aside, what the priorities are and how coming up with a plan is how we're going to achieve and set goals for those. Yeah. And like you said, Liz was in training. She joined the strategy session with us. And so one of the priorities that we had set was to really develop out the management team for the company. And so since then, she has now officially been promoted to clinical director. And that has been amazing for the company, but for me as well, just for a lot of reasons. One, just being that, I was still in this mode of doing everything. All these roles weren't exactly set. And then once she became the director, it almost immediately took all these things off my plate because that was now her role and she was in charge. And then I would get the report from her and I didn't have to spend all day trying to figure out where we were. And it just took 10 hours a week of stuff to this 45-minute meeting with her where she just filled me in on everything that had happened.
Wow. Tell me about that a little bit. That's just one of the priorities that we set up. We had 5. Am I wrong?
We had 5 priorities.
So one of them was developing a leadership team. And this is something that is a common, I wouldn't say necessarily issue for owners, but to transfer and delegate and trust someone to take over some of those leadership roles and responsibilities comes down to they don't know exactly what they're going to turn over. They don't know exactly what that training process looked like and how transitioning that mantle of responsibility over to another person looks like. First of all, when you say she was in training, you delegate or you designated you're going to be trained over this period of time. Am I wrong? Did you set aside a certain period of time and these are the things I'm going to train you on over that period of time? Did you have that laid out?
It probably wasn't as laid out as it, could have been. But when we brought her on to the team, the idea was to eventually become the director. So she would come in.
So she knew that.
She knew that from when we talked about her joining the team.
And did she have and just for me to know, we eventually got to a point where if someone was going to be a clinic director, we actually gave them a title of clinic director in training before we actually gave them the clinic director title. Is that something that you did as well? Or was it just kind of understood, everyone knew that she was kind of in training?
So no, we did that exact first. When she came on, she was just a PT.
Right.
She was to learn the staff, to learn the team, to learn the way things go, to get her numbers up, to get her caseload.
Right.
And then we transitioned to her into director in training. And we had we had a team meeting, told everyone, Liz is the director in training, which means that she is now your direct report. I'm still above that and working on these things with her, but we made that transition where the team would start going to her for certain things.
Cool. And so did you also have some ideas? Some of these things are coming back to mind from our February meeting, that you had some things, and maybe we worked through a few things of, we need her to start learning this, that, and the other thing. So you had maybe a skeleton structure of things that she needed to learn while she was in training, and things you needed to train her on and hand over.
Like a lot of the things we've talked about on these interviews, a lot of what I learned or know what to do is because I've reached out to coaches. And, when I was going through that process, I was asking my coach, some advice and guidance on what to do. And then ultimately what we did was we hired another coach specifically for Liz, and that's Michelle.
Cool. Yeah.
So and it was a great fit because she's worked with you and Will basically as the director. So like she was training Liz and me on like how to set this up. But what was really cool was that because Will is my coach, like I knew that what she was saying to Liz was in line with what I was learning from Will. So it worked out really well.
And that's really cool, because the cool thing about Michelle is she was our vice president of operations in our clinics. And she was essentially at that time in charge of training the leaders and training them up. Right. And so now she's doing the same thing for other owners. And that's cool to hear that she was working with you. I didn't know that. But for her to train your directors in training is a huge benefit to, I'm sure you really appreciated a third party doing the training on your behalf. So it wasn't all coming from you. And that there's something about, I don't know what it is, when you have that authority. Essentially, if you're further up the organization and training someone below you, it's almost like there's a little bit of lack of authenticity. Whereas if there's a third party that comes in, they can be a little bit more honest, open. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. Is that something that you felt was a benefit?
I think it certainly was a benefit to have a third party for what you're saying, and also for just the fact that like I had never done this before,
and you didn't have to do it.
And that too. But yeah, exactly. I think that's why, in a lot of ways, what you're saying resonates in that, having, in the same way that I'm having Liz that Liz is the director, and there's like this layer between me and then the team in general. It helped to, for me, like I don't have to, there's this layer between me directly saying things to the team, and it goes through Liz, and it just comes across from her like she's part of the team. So I don't know if it's exactly the same thing as what you're saying, kind of, though, like from Michelle or from, I have someone who's training Liz, and it's not coming directly from me. Yeah. I think it does help out with some of that.
How long was she the director in training? How long did this take?
I think it was intended to be 3 months. It may have taken a few, maybe 4 or 5 months, just based on where we were, how things we needed to iron things out.
I love pointing this out simply because most owners, and myself included, would be like, okay, you're the director in training now. And there's no process to it. There's no time frame. Who's to say if that person can even lead other people? Whereas the beauty of having that, might call it a buffer, of being the clinic director and trainer, gives you the ability to delegate some responsibilities and see how they do with it.
Right.
And then have some people on the team go to her for certain issues and see how she handles them. Right. And so if it doesn't work out, number one, she never became clinic director. And number two, you never had to give her the salary increase that comes with being a clinic director. And so it gives you and that director in training a trial period. Let's work on this together. If it works out, great. If not, great. Let's just move on together. And so that's really cool. And I'm sure like you said, you're really happy now because there's so much now that's off of your plate, and it's rather her reporting statistics and issues up to you in a weekly meeting and maybe occasionally during the week, but it's much more of a reporting process instead of you having to go and look for things.
Yeah, it's really great. And it's allowed me to then focus on some of these other priorities that we are setting and trying to do to grow and develop the business.
That's a good segue. But one other thing I want to ask you about this clinic director thing that I get asked quite a bit from clients is, how do you set up her schedule? And what are your production expectations from a clinic director? Because I mean, treating 40 hours a week and then ask her to do the supervisory work on top of that, it's not going to work out too well. And there's going to be burnout and upset. How have you scheduled her setup?
So what we've done is, so she's not having a full caseload. She has a caseload, and we've set aside admin time, and we, working with our coach, we've come up with the equation of, I think we devoted like maybe a half hour per FTE or a half hour per provider.
Oh, okay.
Plus for her to have some time to do stuff for the front desk, working with the front desk. Right. And then we have a meeting. She has a meeting with her coach. And then we have set aside some time for her to work on some internal marketing stuff. So she has about 6 hours. I don't know exactly, 6 to 7 hours of admin time to work on stuff other than treating.
Yeah, that I think that sounds about in line with what we did with our clinic directors. I want to say they had a full Tuesday afternoon. Might have even gone into the morning on some weeks if they had other meetings to attend. So about 34, 35 hours a week of patient care, and the other 5 or 6 with admin. And it sounds like whether that's coaching or, like you said, love to hear that you have her promoting some internal marketing. That's amazing. But that sounds about right. 35 hours a week, 34 hours a week of production.
I think it is. I think it's 34 hours of patient visits.
That sounds about right. And if you had a little bit smaller team, maybe that's 36 and it's 4 hours. But just for people who are listening, how many people is she managing?
3 other providers.
3 other providers plus the front desk person.
Right.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Understood. Awesome. And I love the formula, a half hour per FTE. And then of course, an hour with you per week, an hour with her coach every so often. And then a meeting probably with the front desk to oversee that. Yeah. That comes out to about 5 hours, maybe 6 each week. Yeah, I get it. Cool. All right. So congratulations, because developing a leadership team is huge. And the value of your clinic just went up a little bit more. As you're looking at long-term things, if you're ever looking to sell, having that leadership in place and not you running things on the day-to-day makes your clinic just that much more valuable in terms of what its value is monetarily, even though you might not see it in your gross revenues. Right. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, Nathan.
That's cool. All right. So what were some of the other priorities?
So one of the other priorities was, we've talked about this in a lot of ways in other interviews, but was to diversify our marketing plan. Mm-hmm. And in the past interviews with you, we've talked about how I've really used Google Ads to grow the company. We did not really rely on that many doctors. We've had a few doctors here and there. Some of them have dried up. Some of them, have started their own things. We had an orthopedist that would always send us, and they opened up their own PT in their office, so they stopped sending us, obviously. So we've really relied on Google Ads for most of our, the history of the company. But sometimes they don't work, or sometimes something happens with Google's algorithm, or who knows. And so, sometimes they plateau. So what we had talked about in our strategy meeting was to diversify the marketing plan, to focus on internal marketing, to focus on the doctors, to focus on past patients, current patients. And so that's where we set aside that time for Liz to have some admin time to focus on internal marketing. That's where that kind of ties into the priority of diversifying our marketing plan, to not just rely on getting, Google Ads and bringing people in. And so that's been a process. We're still building it out. But some of the things we focused on so far is starting from just the beginning of gaining agreement, just doing powerful evaluations, making sure we're getting buy-in, Well, really, it starts before that. And another thing we did in the strategy session before we did the priorities, we talked
Mhm.
about our purpose and our vision and our values.
Right.
And so we've been working a lot on that as a team. And now that we have some of these values, and we can kind of tie what we do to those values. So if we talk about accountability or teamwork as a value, now we can translate that over to when our patients come and to gain agreement, where we talk to our patients and we get their buy-in by letting them know that this is a team effort, and we're going to
Cool.
hold them accountable, just like we're going to hold ourselves accountable.
Nice.
And that's been what we've been focusing a lot on so far with the internal marketing, is just making sure our patients are buying in to their plans of care so that they schedule out all their visits, and we don't have to focus on bringing new people in because we already have our patients. We just got to get them to get to their visits.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really cool. I love how you took not just your values, which I'm big on, developing your purpose and values and living that and expressing it and talking about it with your team. I love how you took that a step further and want to impose, might sound like the wrong word, but use those values in your evaluations with the patients, right? Like if you were to say one of our values here at our clinic is accountability and teamwork, and that means you as a patient, now we're going to hold you accountable and we're going to work together as a team to accomplish your goal. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think I think it also, just when we all came together as a team to create those values together, I think it comes naturally or more authentically from the providers when they say that to the patients, because they've already agreed that is their value. It's not like I'm saying that is your value. We've all said together, these are our values. And so when they say it, they're thinking, oh yeah, those are my values. And that's why I'm saying that to our patient, because I believe that accountability is my value. And so it's very natural and authentic, and I think it works.
You mentioned prior to pushing record that the things have been a little bit slower. I mean, not bad, but just a little bit slower over the past 3 months. Have you noticed, however, an improvement in patient compliance metrics, whether that's frequency per week or arrival rates or something like that, because of your internal marketing efforts?
So I think, yes, I was telling you before we started that 21 was a great year. 22 started off really good when you were here in February. The next month, March, was our biggest month that we've ever had in terms of visits. And then the 3 months after that, well, maybe not the 3 months, but like the last 3 months have been not as, again, it wasn't slow. It was just kind of flat. Our numbers were basically the same as they were last year.
So this summer and
And
last summer were about the same.
about the same, but we had anticipated growth, so we were kind of overstaffed. So that's where, like, it didn't feel like it felt like we were really slow, but really we weren't slower. We just hadn't really grown.
I got it.
But now in the last 3 to 4 weeks, since I believe it's connected for sure, that we've started this focus on gaining agreement, really talking to our patients and holding them accountable, our numbers really have been going up. And I think that has a lot to do with it. We're really doing a good job of making sure people come to all their visits and scheduling them out and making sure they understand why they're coming in. Like, it's silly that you have to explain to a patient why they're actually coming to physical therapy when they're already there. But like, we have to ask them, like, do you actually want to get better? Because if you do, which is why you're here, well, you have to do all these things that we're saying, and that's the only way it's going to work. And you have to get people to understand that, like, that's actually the only way it's going to work.
That is interesting. It's one of the gaining agreement questions is, do you want to get better? And that might actually throw some patients for a loop.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that everyone would say yes, but
yeah,
you never know, I guess.
How funny. And I know that you've also been, and maybe this also coincides with some of your internal marketing efforts and holding patients accountable, but you've been doing some of Bill's program for your front desk trainings and whatnot. Has that coincided with some of these numbers and improvements as well, you think?
I think so. So with Bill's, the front office guru, we decided to use her as a consultant and really just, that was part of the last few months of when we weren't feeling like our numbers were good. I look to the first call or the front desk, like, what is happening? Maybe the ads that I'm talking about that aren't working, maybe that has to do with us converting them when they call in the first place. So, I mean, I don't know if that's exactly it, but certainly that's what led me to start talking to Dee and then bringing her on we're still pretty early on in her program. We're only five weeks in.
Oh, okay.
But I can tell you that it's definitely making a difference in how the front desk is talking to new patients or current patients when they call. And we are converting more patients for sure. Even patients that are out of network or doing self-pay, like we are getting more and more of those patients. And it just has to do with what Dee has taught us on how to approach and how to talk and relate and start and initiate that relationship with our patients.
That's really impressive. You focused on internal marketing. Have you done more? And I'm assuming your Google ads are kind of the same. So in my mind, there's the four buckets, right? There's current patients, past patients, and it seems like Liz is kind of working on some of that. You have your Google ads, which is marketing to the community. Have you done any more work than working towards marketing physicians and developing those relationships?
We've started. We haven't done too much of it. We're trying to create some systems for like when we get, because again, we don't have doctors who are really sending us patients, but anyone that comes to our office, or not anyone, but most people have some sort of doctor. We get direct access, but then we eventually will get them to get a signed plan of care. So what we're starting to do is, if we start seeing that we get a lot of folks from the same doctor, we're making note of that. But we're creating a list essentially of the physicians. And what we want to do is start reaching out to physicians. And if we see a new doctor in our system, do something to reach out to them, maybe drop something off in their office. We haven't done enough. We've reached out to the doctors who we've already had relationships with, but we haven't done any new stuff really. So we're working on that.
Oh, okay. Is something like a marketing assistant, it's something you've kicked around or considered recently to help you with some of that, or no?
Yes, we just in the last few months also, I've hired a marketing person, a part-time marketing person, just to really do exactly what we're talking about. We made some flyers, and she's gonna go to doctor's offices. She's actually she does a lot with this local urgent care, and so she kind of knows this area really well because she's done a lot of marketing for them. And so she kind of already knows all the places to go.
Cool.
So she's doing local stuff, and then also like starting to go to some of these doctors and drop off flyers and try to get us on their referral list, the preferred providers or whatever.
Yeah.
So that just started recently as well.
Unless marketing really lights your fire and gets you excited, getting a marketing assistant's a better idea, because then it's going to happen consistently and you can just hold them accountable to getting it done.
Yeah. Instead of just doing it when numbers are low, it's like, I gotta do some marketing, and then the numbers come up, and then you just stop it because you're like, I don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah, that was one of my best hires, was when I finally gave marketing responsibilities over to somebody else. I was like, finally. I hate that stuff. No, don't get me wrong. I had some good relationships with doctors who I considered friends, but I hated going. I never wanted to go marketing. That was horrible. Well, tell me a little bit about some of the other priorities that you feel like you've been working on, or someone you still need to work on.
One of the priorities was to manage by stats, and I would say that especially with getting the director in place, and I'm getting this director's report every week, which includes the report from the front desk, the patient care coordinator. She gives her report to Liz, and then I get all of that. That is, honestly, I don't know if we've taken it to like the next level of managing by stats, but we're now like, we have a organized way of looking at all of our stats. Cool. And now we're using that to be able to project, or at least know ahead of time. We don't have it dialed in that to where like we're using those numbers and making great decisions, but we're at the point where we now have that foundation, and now we can start doing it. So I think that's progress for sure.
Don't give yourself too little credit there. You're kind of there. And I'm not sure exactly what that vision looks like for you, but when you're managing by stats, you're simply looking at the stats. And if you haven't done by now, I'm sure Will or Michelle will train you guys, but looking at the previous 4 to 6 week trend, where's the trend going and how do we respond to that? Do we need to just keep doing what we're doing because things are moving in a positive direction? Or are things going in a negative direction and we need to change our operating basis? So if you're not doing that, you're 95% of the way there. So
yeah,
that is managing
I think
by stats.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the only thing we're not doing is like, I think we are getting the numbers, and we kind of know, oh, we have to do something or we don't. But it's just the last part is like, okay, what do we do?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that honestly, it's a little bit of training, but it's not a lot. And
Yeah.
if you get a little training on that, then you can look at those formulas whenever the trends are going a different way.
I'd say another managing by stats is really paying attention to the P&L, and like,
Oh, good.
because what I'm finding out is like, you can have months of a lot of visits, or you look at the cancels or no shows, but ultimately it comes down to the bottom line. And
Yeah.
maybe you have a month where you don't bring in as much, but your expenses are really low. I'm just throwing out scenarios. So it's just like, it just gives a much better picture of what's really going on in the business, instead of just like thinking what's going on. Oh yeah, well, our numbers are up, our visits are up, we must be doing really well. You look at the P&L, like for us, and then one month we were not as good as I thought, but that was, you look at the changes in what we're doing, and we ramped up our budget for ads, and we spent a lot more on this, and
Yeah.
those are things we had to do, but at least it gives us an explanation of why those numbers are they are.
Yeah. And where did you learn how to read a P&L? Was that something that you knew beforehand?
No, but when I first started, when I started, I just kind of had a weekly or monthly meeting with the bookkeeper, and just kind of
Good.
had him show me what to look at. And now I can go into QuickBooks and run the
And read it
reports.
yourself.
Yeah, and then you can change compare to previous year, compare and by percentage or by change,
Right.
and so I don't necessarily know all the things, but I can go in there and play around with it to get a good idea of what's
Well,
going on, which is cool.
And every owner should, just for that exact reason. They should know, why do I have a negative profit so far this month, instead of just looking at the account and what the number says in your savings account, checking account.
Right.
Look at the P&L. Why is it negative? Oh, we had 3 payrolls this month. That's why. Okay, that explains things.
Right.
So we're not going to hell quickly. I mean, everything's okay. We just had 3 payrolls, and it just happened like that. That happens. So knowing why, I'm really glad you brought up the P&L thing, because there's plenty of owners that have been owners for, like me, who were owners for 8 to 10 years and had never looked at a single P&L, didn't know their financials, didn't know what the balance sheet was. And so when I had to finally ask my CPA, I said, we're going to meet monthly for an hour, and you're going to show me what a profit and loss statement is and how to read it, and then show me what I need to know from it, because I don't know what I don't know. And then he would start showing me, like you said, this year compared to the last year, August to August, since we're August 2022, August to August of 2021, or this month compared to last month, what is the quarterly trend? If he's a good CPA, he's telling you how much to set aside for quarterly taxes, so you're not surprised with a tax bill at the end of the year. And so, looking at that on a regular basis is imperative for an owner. And it just tells, even if it's not necessarily directing what you're doing financially, and it should occasionally. I mean, you'll have a budget or a pro forma that you can build out upon that. Like you said, it tells you why. Why are we where we are? And why was there $1,000 in office expenses this month compared to every other month when it's $200? Stuff like that.
But or like what you said, like just looking at your bank account, because this happened to me, and I still do it. Like, I look at my bank account, I don't understand it, but we had switched over to an S corp, so I started paying myself through payroll, and so it's not a huge amount, but it's just now I'm actually going through payroll, whereas when I wasn't an S corp, I was just taking distributions.
Right.
And so I'm just like, well, why is this month so much different? And it's like, oh, well, that's because I've already paid myself, whereas usually it was like at the end of the month where I've just done a distribution. So it's just that's just to point out, like, yeah, you can't just look at your bank account. That doesn't tell you the whole picture.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm really glad that you brought up the P&L thing in terms of statistics, because you don't usually tie your financials with your statistics and the operating the business, but it is a huge part of it. And I'm glad you brought it up. Okay. Any other priorities that you want to point out?
We did management team, marketing plan. So the other thing was, one thing to really focus on recruiting. I had talked to my coach about when I was transitioning Liz into the director. I was, I had a call with him, and I was kind of trying to figure out, like, okay, now that I'm making Liz the director, like, what's my role?
Yeah.
So, so
Good.
he laid it out into a few categories of things that like I should be focusing on. One was recruiting. One was making sure policies and procedures were good, and also focusing on like the purpose and the vision.
Right.
And so when you came in February, we were talking a little bit about that, I guess. And so we talked about how I was going to start really focusing on recruiting, and not just like, oh, we're busy, let's hire someone now, but more so having people that you've already networked with. So when the time comes, you have people that you can kind of be like, hey, we need to bring someone on. We talked, a few months ago, it was a good fit. Are you ready to come on?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of did that. It didn't end up working out, but I had
Yeah.
someone that I had networked with, and the timing seemed to work out. It just didn't end up working out in the end, but
Right.
it was all, but I could see how in the future that will be great. Whereas like, okay, now it's time, our numbers are up again. We need to hire. I already have this person who I talked to. Let's just, make the call and have them come. Whereas now, if we get busy, now I have to just start the whole ad process over. And I
Yeah.
have to, might take 2 months before we find the right fit. Whereas, and during that time, we're like super busy and we're losing patients and we're not being able to schedule them.
Yeah. And I think from a bigger picture, some owners, I don't know if fear is the right word, but just a state of unknowing, like, okay, if I give these responsibilities to a clinic director, what am I going to do? What do I do with my time? And there can be a little bit of fear behind that because, I've been training my whole life to be a physical therapist and now I'm not doing any therapy. Question of your purpose comes up, right? What do I do as a CEO of my business with middle management in place? And that's where you're looking, like you said, you're looking at bigger picture items. What does our recruiting program look like? What do my financials look like? You should be doing that whether you're a CEO. Well, you're always the CEO of your own business, but whether you have middle management or not, you should be looking at your financials. Now that you have a marketing assistant, you should have a marketing strategy, right? And you have some with your internal marketing, and now this marketing assistant is doing some other things, and you have your Google ads, but it should be a little bit more developed and refined, and there should be marketing systems. And now you have recruiting systems, and now you have policy and procedure manuals, and you're establishing that in place with a D-Bills program, so you don't have to create it from scratch, right? And making sure that's implemented. And all of these things tied to the purpose and values and making sure that's being laid out. And I'm sure now that you have some time, you're also looking forward. You have the time and you have the mental bandwidth to look forward on your calendar, like, hey, such and such is coming up, whether it's a holiday or an event, or say, I don't know, October is National Physical Therapy Month. Hey guys, what are we going to do as a clinic for National Physical Therapy Month, instead of remembering on October 4th that, oh yeah, it's physical therapy month. What are we going to do? I mean, you just have that brain space, right, to look forward on the calendar as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that I realized last, I guess, December, like when in the holiday season. It was just something that like, or maybe even now, just during the summer, like as we went through it and passed, I realized now moving forward, I can kind of prepare for it a little bit better. But
Yeah.
I realized how when you're not prepared for it, how it can just hit and then it's too late. And if we can prepare ahead, like you said, especially for, let's say, the holiday season in December, knowing that we're going to have plenty of cancellations or what, that's a season where it's different. Like we could, however we decide, we plan for it, but at least we are putting that in some type of, we're thinking about it and we're trying to do something to either prevent it or to not always prevent things, but to kind of act when we can't, and just know ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Any other priorities that we didn't hit on?
The only other priority that we talked about that I didn't mention yet was cash-based services, to just kind of create additional revenue streams. And honestly, I haven't gotten anywhere with that. We have like self-pay patients, but they weren't like it wasn't anything else. It was just more, we were trying to think of like maybe adding additional revenue streams like massage or some of these ancillary services, but that just kind of took that's on the back burner for now.
Is that something that you think you might address? I mean, you still got 3, 4, 5 months if you're going to say this is a 12-month program. Is that something you'd consider the last quarter of this year or even the first of next year? Or do you think it might fall off priorities?
I did put an ad out for a part-time massage therapist. So, I guess I did a little bit. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm not really spending too much time on it right now, but there's no like the reason we were talking about is like I have the space. I don't do anything on the weekends at our office. Like,
Oh, okay.
why not? Why not
Sure.
bring in a massage therapist? It's just extra revenue. You
Right.
know, we make a deal with them, you know, a split
Yeah.
or however we decide that. Why not use the space? So it's not the primary focus right now with all these
Okay.
priorities.
Yeah.
So it's probably, you know, that's why I mentioned it last. But sure, if I, you know, spend a little time, I bet we can get something going.
Where do you feel like you're spending a little bit more of your time now in your CEO seat now that you have this clinic director?
I would say recruiting, only because that's actually what I've had to do for the last few months. Not for PT though, because our
We
front
had to get a
desk,
front desk person too. Yeah.
she told me ahead of time when I approached her about the D bills. You know, I wanted to make sure that she knew that this wasn't like me micromanaging, but it was a more of a way that we can get this coaching and consulting and the systems really to make her job easier so that we could, you know, help her out. And then she told me that she was actually planning on moving to North Carolina in a few months. And so she was like, "Are you sure you want to start that program when I'm still here?" So we did end up starting the program, but I then had to spend some time trying to get the right person in place for the front desk. So and then in my back office, I had two people that basically I kind of knew they were were in a master's program and this was like a part-time job.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of knew that they were going to end up going back to school anyways. And so it just kind of happened all at once though. So I had to look for all these admin people. So it was recruiting. It wasn't exact recruiting that I would like to be doing beforehand, but that is what I was spending a lot of time on. But honestly, a lot of it is still really working with the director. And just now that she's the director, she's meeting with the team. She's coming back to me like, "Hey, we're not clear on the authorization process. Who's communicating to who for what?"
Okay.
And so then we can kind of come up with a plan, and then she can then go ahead and address it. So
I got it.
Yeah. And then other than that, I think the marketing is really what I've been trying to focus on.
Where do you see your next steps? And I guess where I might direct this is towards, where do you see your next leader coming from? Where do you see a leadership void that you want to fill in the near future? Or are you focused on other things right now?
No, I think the void is that we don't have an office manager. So I have.
Okay. And when you say office manager, someone that oversees more of the front desk,
front and back.
Mean some of the more HR related issues as well, maybe.
Yeah. So maybe it's not office manager, but basically taking away all the things that I still do that are just like HR related, payroll, or some of the stuff interacting with the billing company, just some of those things that like I don't really need to be spending my time doing it. If it would be much more useful for me to focusing on our vision and our values and recruiting and, you know, continuing to develop out our policies and procedures so that we can continue to grow the business. I think that we've made huge gains in growth in terms of like our foundation, that we have this management team, that we're building this front office, you know, with D-bills, we're really building this whole policies and procedure manual for the front. I think once that is kind of solidified, and maybe we get someone to take some of those HR things off of my plate, like I will be really ready to grow the business to the next level.
Maybe you don't want to share all your secrets, but are you looking at maybe expanding to a larger place or finding a second location?
So that's an interesting question, because our building was purchased by, you know, a new company bought our building, and they have let me know their intentions of basically like knocking down the building. The thing is I have 7 years left on my lease. So they're kind of like, they came to me and said, you know, this is our plan. If we need to help you or motivate you to leave, you know, we want to talk to you about that. I've got plenty of time to look, but it's interesting that you asked that, because like the answer to that is I really kind of just have to look for a new location. There's no reason to wait the 7 years. I kind of just have to get out.
Especially if they're going to quote unquote incentivize you to
exactly. So hopefully that'll work out. Maybe, you know, they already mentioned like if we need to help you with the move, if, you know, whatever it is. I'm not going to like try to, you know, use that against them, but no,
I'm going to stay here 7 years. I don't care.
But at least if they can, you know, help me with the costs for moving and maybe that loss of business, or they're a, you know, a real estate company, so maybe they can help me find a place to move to.
Exactly. Oh, that's cool, man. Exciting. Well, like you said, even though the numbers haven't significantly increased, I think you can look at your company and say you've made tremendous strides in this past year in terms of your growth, right?
Definitely. And that's I'm glad that I know that I feel that, because if I was just looking at like the financials,
Yeah.
and we're doing okay, but it's just not like what I was thinking it was going to be compared to last year.
Especially since you've been accelerating in growth the past few years. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so and then when this year was a little less or slower, it would have been easier just to kind of get, feeling down or sad about what's going on. But I know that the work that we're doing with the foundational growth, with Liz as the director and the front office, like that is huge growth. And I can feel it. And everyone in the office feels it. We're That's just a better team. And right now, thank God, we're like, our schedule is completely full. Like we don't even have, it's great. And so now it's like, okay, we got to hire someone. I wish I had someone to bring on right now had I been spending that time recruiting. So, hopefully it stays that way, and hopefully we get back to growing like we were last year.
And I think you're much more positioned to accept that increased growth, whether there is an expansion or in one way or another. Having laid the foundation, you're prepared to grow. Whereas if you hadn't done some of this, then that growth just exposes a lot of flaws and doesn't really turn out well for most of the team.
I think, Nathan, that's what I've always felt, just, I don't know, cautiously or intuitively or whatever, that I always wanted to just not grow too fast. And I've always wanted to just make sure the foundation was there, because I always just felt like if we got too big, that I wouldn't be able to handle it if those things weren't there.
Right.
And so I think now I think what you just said is, I feel that way, that we're much more ready for this growth now that we have some of these foundational things really set in place.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, congratulations on your growth so far. It's exciting to catch up with you, man.
Yeah, likewise. I'm glad to do this again. It was really awesome having you come to do the strategy session. If you don't mind, put a little plug in for your listeners.
Thanks, man.
Having Nathan come for the strategy session was really, it was very powerful. It was just really awesome to think about what needed to be done, how to think about how we're going to go about doing it, setting those 5 priorities, and then, and then just kind of setting mini goals along the way to get them going. And not that I've made all of this progress on all of those things, but I know if I hadn't had those 5 priorities set, I probably wouldn't have done a lot of these things that I've done. And so it was super, super helpful to have you come and do the strategy session. It just gave me kind of an idea, a blueprint of what to do this year.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you had a great experience with it, because those things can be really powerful, and it can be hard for small business owners because you have so many things coming at you from different directions. It's really important to know how to filter what is important and what is not out of all of those distractions. Some of them are more urgent than others, and maybe they need to be dealt with. But when you have a free moment and you're like, what do I focus on now? Having those 5 priorities can just be really easy to take you down the path that you're actually getting important things done.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Yep.
Well, thanks for your plug. I appreciate it. It was great working with you, man. I'm sure we'll be checking in with you here again in the next few months. So good luck with the rest of the 2022.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Talk to you later, Avi.
All right. Bye, Nathan.